February 2014, and today I want to talk about the anti-environmental movement. Okay, well, apologies for being out of breath, but once again I'm walking up a hill. I'll let you look at that instead of my ugly mug, but yes. Anyway, yeah, so the anti-environmental movement, what do I mean by that? Essentially there's four particular strands which I've kind of identified. By far the biggest is climate change denial, human-assisted climate change denial, and the whole movement that's promoting that. Then not far behind is the Agenda 21 conspiracy and related conspiracies, and then strongly allied to the climate change denial camp is the libertarian capitalist movement. And the fourth thing, which I kind of include with these other three because it kind of acts as a recruiting sergeant for libertarian capitalists, is the freemen of the land movement, which is a movement based on asserting your common law rights. So who's behind the anti-environmentalist movement? That's a pretty simple question to answer. It's corporations, usually oil corporations or mining corporations or logging corporations, basically corporations which rely on extracting natural resources for their profits. And very often these corporations are by far the biggest in the world. And oh, just scared of blackbird. So I mean, if I give the example of just how reliant you are on oil, I mean, here we've got a fence, fairly normal looking rural stock fence, and well, I mean, this wire, the materials for that were mined from the ground using oil energy. It was then processed using oil energy. It was then converted into wire using oil energy. It was then arranged into this fence-like shape using oil energy. It was then transported here using oil energy. The people who put it up were fed on food that was grown using oil energy, that was transported to them using oil energy, and then when they finished putting the fence up for their job for the day, they went back to their house, which runs off oil energy. It's everywhere. The preservative in this post is probably made directly from oil. There's an old washing machine or something down there full of plastic that's also made from oil and made using oil energy. It's everywhere. You are, I am, we all are completely dependent on oil for our civilization. And when you start to consider this, you just start to wake up and realize the power that oil companies have over absolutely everything. They own the basic resource of our society, of our civilization, and the banks can't take them, governments can't take them. They own everything, absolutely everything. So when you start to consider an issue like climate change, where a lot of scientists are saying we've got to cut down our use of fossil fuels at the very minimum, plenty more are saying we've got to stop using them now, or there's going to be disaster for life on this planet. Depends who you want to listen to. I'm not quite that far down the road of doom-mongery, but I do think things are looking pretty bad. But when you consider that people are trying to get initiatives to stop dependence on fossil fuels, that's the last thing that the most powerful corporations in the world want to happen. And they've got a lot of funds and resources to try and back themselves up and make sure that doesn't happen. I seriously think the only thing that's working in their favour is those corporations are composed of individuals some of whom will look at the situation regarding climate change and be personally concerned. But the problem for those individuals is if the CEO or whoever it is who runs Exxon, or one of the CEOs of Exxon, suddenly said, hey, we're destroying the planet here, do you think we should do something about it? His immediate subordinates are going to shout, look, he's costing us money, get rid of him, I'll do his job instead. And there's literally a whole world of people who are ready to carry on up that rung of the ladder and fill the shoes of the person working above them. And profit is king. If you don't make a profit, you lose your job. So yeah, there's a huge vested interest, the oil industry, which wants to deny that climate change is caused by their industry. But yeah, then you've also got the other conspiracy theories, like the Agenda 21 conspiracy theory, and this is a really good example of controlled opposition. Briefly, I mean, the Agenda 21 conspiracy is based around this UN document from 1992, which is, the reality is the document was put together by some scientists, politicians, environmentalists, people who were worried about the state of the planet, and they wanted some kind of global UN guideline and were hoping for some kind of regulation to stop the destruction of our environment. But it got watered down before it even got to being presented at the UN, and the final nail in the coffin was it was completely non-binding. Even if you signed up to this thing, you don't have to abide by it. So yeah, it's basically been ignored since its inception, and there really is no real example of anything happening in the real world as a result of Agenda 21, apart from maybe a few rubber stamps on some very local environmental projects like building ponds or something. They might have got some funding to do that from the UN, but otherwise, no, it's had no effect on the planet whatsoever. Now, the Agenda 21 conspiracy theory, this is the idea that Agenda 21 is some kind of nefarious document that is a long-term plan by the UN and various shady elites who want to depopulate the Earth to 1 billion people, or 500,000 people, I think it is. Blah-de-blah, it's all kind of right-wing paranoia, basically. And yeah, much like the climate change denial machine, when you research their arguments, you quickly find out it's all rubbish. I may have a talk about the Agenda 21 conspiracy at some other point and give a bit more detail about it. But yeah, and then you've got libertarian capitalism, which is basically about taking all regulation away and leaving everything to the free market, and the free market will sort everything out, protect the environment. If companies harm the environment, then people stop buying their products, and the environment will be protected by market forces, which has been proven to be complete nonsense time and time again. Typical example, the Iraq War. Most people in the UK, I gather most people in America, did not want the Iraq War to go ahead. Every Doris on the street in Britain was completely aware that the war was about oil, but I didn't see anyone boycott driving their car for unnecessary journeys or anything like that. It doesn't happen. The free market does not protect the environment. In fact, it does the opposite. Yeah, so then you've got the freemen of the land movement, which again is really a movement born out of right-wing libertarian America, and this is again encouraging people to stop paying taxes, to be suspicious of any kind of governance whatsoever, and insist that you can pretty much do what you like and not really have much responsibility towards society. And like I said, this kind of is very appealing to people who are having a difficult time, they're in debt or things like that, or they can't afford to pay their council tax or whatever. But the freemen of the land movement has a lot of ties with libertarian capitalism, and libertarian capitalism has a lot of ties with corporations. So essentially, if you reverse engineer all these conspiracies, climate change denial, the Agenda 21 conspiracy, libertarian capitalism, and try and work out who it actually serves, it serves corporations making lots of money. And what do corporations want, for instance, in regard to libertarianism? They want complete unrestricted access to all public lands and all resources with no regulation to stop them doing it. And that's pretty much the bottom line with climate change deniers, or the oil-funded lobby that denies climate change. And it's really muddy here. They want free access to do whatever they like, and so do logging companies, so do ranching companies, so do mining companies. And need to make no mistake that the natural environment, the global ecology, is absolutely on its arse. It really is. And the more you look into what's going on with it, the more you come to realise just how bad things are. So the question arises of, why do people believe in the Agenda 21 conspiracy, climate change being a hoax, etc., etc. Firstly, people just don't want to believe it. The perception is, in order to do something about environmental problems, you've got to give up your nice modern lifestyle, and they're probably right. You probably will have to at some point. It's not going to go away. But the other thread to this is that in the modern world, we've got so much communication and so much information, and people are starting to realise that maybe this world we live in isn't entirely fair, and they've lost their trust in the cultural frameworks that we've had for such a long time, such as religion or politics or the very structure of our government. And there's kind of an ideological vacuum where people don't know what to believe in, and so there's a tendency to grasp at any old line of thought out there and say, that's the answer, it's not my fault, it's them, it's the Rothschilds, it's the UN, it's whoever, it's the elites, whatever. There's a culture of blame, that the problems of the world have nothing to do with us, they're always someone else's fault. Yeah, so people are willing to believe anything they can, rather than the reality that the natural environment's in a terrible state, and it's our overconsumption which is the main problem. And so couple that with very well funded propaganda campaigns by corporate interests, then you have quite a strong Anti-Environmentalist Movement. And when you start to think about it, you sort of think of your political system and the political parties that you have an option to vote for, or the political parties that have any chance of getting elected. And it doesn't take a genius to see that both sides on the left and the right are owned by corporations. They work for corporations. There's very few what I'd call real politicians left out there. Certainly very few in the UK, but there are still some. But there is no one to curtail the activities of large corporations. I've got to stop here, I've got to try and negotiate this. So yeah, you've got these huge corporations, these extraction corporations, operating pretty much unopposed by any political force, and really the only threat to their activities is the idea of environmentalism, the idea of protecting the environment. And the environmentalist movement isn't so much a movement as a statement of reality. So these corporations who are threatened by environmentalists, because environmentalists are the only ones in any kind of position to oppose them, they will come up with all kinds of crazy reasons and distraction arguments. For instance, a typical example is when it comes to climate change, one of the main arguments you'll hear is something like Al Gore's got a big house, therefore climate change can't be real, or it's all about them, whoever they are, wanting to tax us. But these arguments have absolutely no bearing on what is the scientific reality of the situation. Okay, I've got to get through all this again now. But yeah, this propaganda machine worries me when I look at what is the supposed protest movement on the internet. I see a lot of this pro-corporation, anti-environmentalist rhetoric going on. There seem to be a lot of people who deny climate change. There seem to be a lot of people who see any government regulation as a bad thing and can't seem to grasp the fact that it's corporations and their incessant drive for profit which is the reason most people in the world are oppressed in various ways, and is also the reason why environmental systems, ecological systems, are failing all over the world. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the argument many times of if you had an illness, you'd go to a doctor. You wouldn't go to some guy down the pub who appears to be very convincing and appears to know what he's talking about. But that's pretty much the same argument. You know, the reason we have all this technology and medical science and all the world, this modern world we live in, is because of science, and because of scientists trusting the word of other scientists and accepting they do know what they're talking about. And when it comes to the environment and climate change and similar issues, you'll go a long way trying to find a scientist who says there isn't a problem. And we're not just talking a few scientists here, we're talking tens of thousands all over the world, living under all kinds of different political systems, and they do know what they're talking about. If a website's funded by an oil company and it's denying climate change, and all scientists are saying climate change is real, you've really got to question why you're believing what is on that website. Yeah, so I guess the main message of this video is the environment is in a terrible state. There's people with a vested interest who want to tell you different and want to tell you that those who are saying it's in a terrible state are actually the ones trying to control you, scam you, con you, kill you. And the reality is, in a developed country like the UK, people like myself, or people who are in a prominent position to talk about the environment, get shouted down. I've lost count of the amount of times I've received emails saying I'm a shill, I'm working for the man, I hate humanity, blah de blah. However, if you're not fortunate enough to live in a developed country, say if you live in Nigeria, where they're drilling for oil and have been for a long time, you try opposing them, you will be killed. In South America, if you try opposing logging companies, you will be killed. And I'm sure there's plenty of conspiracy theorists out there who will quite happily believe stories about people who invent cars which run off water and things like that. You'll happily believe stories that they'll be killed, but for some reason you can't accept that they might possibly be lying to you about climate change.